Maayong hapon sa tanan. It's always a pleasure coming back here to the University of San Carlos. My paper focuses on the aspect of revision. So I was so amazed by the presentations earlier this morning because I'm learning lots of methods from other fields. But here we are coming from literary studies. So the basic method is textual analysis and interpretation. So I look into the revision by comparing three versions of the poem Odysseus Cripple at Bantayan Island by Merlie Alunan, which he wrote on November 27, 1997, that is part of a suite called Bantayan Notebook. The poem first came out in the Likhaan Book of Poetry and Fiction in 1998, edited by Charleston Ong and J. Neil Garcia, then in Going Home to a Landscape, published by Calyx Press in 2003, and Running with Ghosts and Other Poems, published by Ateneo de Naga University Press in 2017. Craft pertains to the syntactic and semantic choices. So syntax, structure, no? And then semantics, choice of words, right? And how they mean. That I infer based on the differences among the three versions. Care pertains to how these choices answer the central questions on the relationship of the speaker and Odysseus in the poem. The gaze of compassion towards a lost being hindered by disability, even when the narrator is themself also lost or longing for home. In the role of language in shifting the location of disability from the physical body to the environs where that body is located, emphasizing environment not as mere setting, but as agent that actively conditions mobility and ability, and is therefore crucial to understanding a subject's longing and exile. Next slide, please. Mike Oliver, in his social model of disability, argues, and I quote, that it was not impairment that was the main cause of social exclusion of disabled people, but the way society responded to people with impairments. Poets writing about disability have a crucial role in challenging ableist practices and must be vigilant in their reading and writing that deal with persons with disabilities. Conscious questioning of language must be encouraged to think deeper on what words mean and discover better ways of building vocabulary. How we speak around and with people with disabilities matter a lot, the kind of language that we use. If not being careful with language, poets may write disability through able-bodied gaze, which can cause harm to persons with disabilities. The focus on disability as a problem that needed to be fixed or cured is known in academia, and especially in the field of disability studies as the medical model of disability. So hanggang ngayon, marami pa rin sa atin na ang pagkakaintindi sa disability ay nakaangkla sa medical na framework. Nasa katawan pa rin ang disability. A poetics of disability can serve as a potent guide for disabled bodies to move in ableist spaces. Ableism can take many forms, including harmful language. It can come in the use of metaphors that make use of images of disability, such as the moon is blind tonight, which are not only cliche, but they are bad poetry at the outset. Next, please. Merlie Alunan is a poet who does not need much introduction, but to those who do not are in the field of literary studies, she's one of the premier poets alive in this country, and also an important scholar situated in the Visayas, but has done cultural work in Visayas and Mindanao. A much decorated writer and scholar, Alunan received the Southern Pho Award from the Thailand Ministry of Culture in 2013, given to the most excellent poets of the ASEAN. So in the photo, you can see her standing beside Singapore's Edwin Thumbo, another personal favorite poet who wrote the poem Ulysses by the Mere Lion. So who knows, no, if the other poets in this roster also wrote their own Odyssey poems. This is highly probable given the familiarity, our familiarity with Homer's epic, the Odyssey, which is the sequel, no, to Iliad, right? Remember Helen of Troy. Next, please. So, Odysseus is a mythological character, no? In the epic of Iliad and Odyssey by Homer. Okay, he's the king of Ithaca. Odysseus is the strong, able-bodied king of Ithaca, fighting with the Greeks or helping Menelaus get back his wife Helen from the Trojans. No, si Helen yung willing na kidnap victim, no? Kasi parang may alinlangan siyang ma-rescue, right? So, after the 10-year fight, they are dispersed by Athena and Poseidon, and Odysseus has to go on, so to say, with his odyssey for another 10 years before he returns to Ithaca. So, an odyssey is basically a journey towards home. In this case, Homer's Odyssey functions as our hypotext, no? Yung pinakamatandang teksto na kung saan nagmi-mirror ang mga bagong teksto, no? In whatever year. Kumbaga, ang Odyssey ang hypotext. Ang Odysseus Cripple in Bantayan Island is what we call a hypertext. It's a text that came out after the hypotext, no? So merong chronology. Homer's Odyssey functions as hypotext, and Odysseus is the archetype of the wanderer longing for home. Next, please. The third version from Running with Ghosts, and this is with the assumption, no, that the latest version contains Alunan's further refinement of what I call craft and care, is as follows. Odysseus Cripple at Bantayan Island. Pitiless, this vast light of noon. Hot wind presses a salt kiss on the skin. Bantayan Island, such a way, west of Leyte, where I come from. Struggler though I am here, still, this isle is like my own. Starveling dogs roaming the sand dunes, armies of sand crabs guarding their holes. The children too, with sun-burnished hair, brown and thin, lilting the sea sounds in their voices, my bittersweet familiars. Not that other one, white-skinned, blue-eyed traveler, hefting himself on crutches of stem, dragging his body, his shriveled, useless legs, inch by inch across the sand. Odysseus Cripple wandered far from his own ice-locked continent to this atoll east, north, west, south of nowhere. Children gape at his odd gait as he makes his way under the palm trees. He meets nobody's eyes, squinting past the breakers to rims of farther shores. His bald paint with its blunt fringe glistens in the noon glare. On that very chair on borrowed space, he sits in a cripple's density of patience. He speaks to no one, not a word uttered to him in return. No one asks for his name, whence he came, why he's here. No one inquires. By dint of what resolve he'd vanquish space to come to these strange shoals. When he leaves, obliged no doubt by some splendid Nordic design that he alone may satisfy, a simple thing for wind to blow sand over his tracks, then it would seem he'd never come here. Sand crabs scamper to their holes in their habit of reticence as he draws by. In a while they'd be back to resume their sovereign watch. I will pass on, like him, just another stranger, perhaps never to return. But this light, this peerless light would stay long after us, constant, merciless, and blinding from the vast and eyeless sky. Next, please. So here is the 1997 version, or 1998, no? Kasi na-print siya 1998. And then, next, please. And the next version is the 2003 version, no, from Going Home to a Landscape. So I call that V1 and V2. So even though the dramatic situation in the poem is quite clear, there are certain questions that do not easily yield answers, such as, next please, who is the persona? What is the persona's relationship with Odysseus? What is the persona's attitude to being stranded in the island and to the disability of Odysseus? Next, please. Like many hypertexts of the Odyssey, Odysseus Cripple is small in scale, the voice and point of view are specific, the actions are limited, and the context is local. So we do not know if the narrator here is Circe or Calypso or Nausicaa once we think of equivalences. Though nameless, the narrator calls the stranded man Odysseus to tap into the archetypal journeying or sojourning man. Next, please. What we do know is that the narrator does not keep Odysseus Cripple from leaving, that they acknowledge that they are also leaving or passing Bantayan Island, that they come from Leyte, no? Which is not very far from Bantayan, but like the Iya of Circe and the Mediterranean of Odysseus, the sea can be so vast without friends, directions, and implements. No? So next, please. So if we compare version 1, no, and version 2, we notice only very few loci of revisions, minor change of words, sequence, and enjambment. Next, please. So, konti lang, no, ang difference ng 1998 at 2003 versions. Next, please. But very remarkable, however, is the movement of the lines in V1 to a later part in V2. No, what's to gain by asking his name, whence he came, why he's here, inquire by what dint of resolve he'd vanquish pains to come to these shows. You see, bumaba siya, no? And is now being delayed by 8 lines in the newer version. While this curiosity in V1 and V2 is heightened by their interrogative forms, naka-question mark sila, the questions become declarative in V3, suggesting further a weaker urgency and a sense of peace over a more organic leaning of his identity and story. In fact, no one asked for his name, whence he came, why he's here. No one inquires by dint of what resolve he'd vanquish space to come to these strange shoals. So, yung mga pagtatanong, no, ay nawala sa version 3. They just let Odysseus be. Next, please. The revisions between version 2 and version 3 are more complex and aggressive. Hindi ko ito iisa-isahin, no, kasi nga baka abutin tayo bukas. On the right, we see version 3, and on the left, we see version 2. But the crisscrosses indicate either syntactic or semantic choices in Alunan's process of revision. For example, tingnan natin, no, yung word na pitiless opens version 3, while in version 2, it is at the end of the first line, giving more emphasis on the pitilessness of the light rather than the light itself, and immediately evokes the cruel atmosphere in the poem. We also have a break to start another stanza. We see semantic changes, no? Changing the word heated to hot, not such a way to such a way, from home to from, not that one to not that other one, dragging his body on shriveled legs to dragging his body, comma, his shriveled legs. Shriveled, useless legs, no? Next, please. So there are more instances, no, of rearrangements, changes in word choice, pacing, omissions, additions in the next stanzas. So we see the questions there being dropped in version 2 and become declarative in version 3. Next, please. So borrows becomes holes, no? Claims becomes watched, as he does becomes like him. Stranger is moved down to the next line to make way for I will above it. Next, please. These syntactic and semantic revisions, if we listen carefully, no, to the more recent versions, The language and tone are gentler to the suffering Odysseus in the poem. By saying the isle is like my own, the persona's entitlement over the island is diminished and opens a space for a stranger with a cripple. Voices from speeches acknowledges language or connection that is not necessarily in the form of words, but also other sounds. No? Matter to thing softens the blow of absence after one leaves, dropping the question in the rather impatient or frustrated, what's to gain? Easily lets Odysseus be in his silence and mystery. And lastly, next please. In conclusion, studies that untangle disability and environment are important to advocate how persons with disabilities have more agency and strategy in modifying environments and eliminating barriers in a day-to-day life, and how persons with no disabilities can help build an environment without barriers. What a poet does with language, being aware of its consequences and impact, is never neutral. It is, and I quote Walker, natural, political, economic, and so on. I assert that Alunan's revisions reflect this awareness in her poetry. Alunan crafts Odysseus' immediate life space through a more compassionate language in the worlding of Bantayan Island in the 2017 version. The revisions offer a gesture of hospitality which is needed, and I quote, to sustain a hospitable home, even if, in the case of Odysseus Cripple, only momentarily. Hospitality alleviates ordinary obstacles that prevent a functional life in a new environment and allows for home-making practices triggered by the vulnerability created by displacement, such as the material, emotional, and political harms resulting from the loss of home. Thank you, og maayong hapon sa tanan.